Welcome everyone. I am so excited to be here with you all and with Dr. Louise Edwards, who's here with me today. I am super excited that you're here, and it's just wonderful. And I'm excited to tell everyone that you went on a all-women expedition to the fjords of Norway, studying orca behavior. Uh, would love to hear some more about that. Could you please tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everybody. Thanks so much for coming, and thanks, Helen, for inviting me to share about our expedition. So, about July last year, I was hankering for a little bit of adventure and some new experiences, and looking for some opportunities to build some new cool VR to kind of helps people kind of enjoy experience the earth in more profound ways. And I came upon an opportunity called Sea Women Expeditions, and this is an organization that I'd been following for a little while, um, where the whose kind of mission was to support women scientists and artists in leadership, and also to use the expertise of women to um, investigate and report and share stories of polar regions. Previous expeditions have been more to Arctic areas in moreover Canada and North America, where you get a lot of sea ice. So it was charting disappearing sea ice. But the expedition that was planned for November last year involved the Arctic fjords of Norway. And thanks to the jet stream, this hot bit of water that comes up from Florida, there's no sea ice there, but still definitely being impacted by human-induced climate change and just humans in general. The idea of this expedition was to bring together groups of women and to participate in a few different projects, one of which was an orca behavior program. So um, the history of the Arctic fjords of Norway, and a bit of a side note on their kind of history and economy. They've been reliant for many years on the herring fishery, and in the late 20th century, due to a number of technological advances and such, there was and other environmental impacts. There were several very major stock collapses that really kind of decimated the industry. And in an attempt to become to rejuvenate the local economy and keep young people living in these kind of remote areas on the coast, Arctic coast, in the fjords, efforts were made to a transition was made by many into ecotourism, inspired by the presence of orca and humpback whales in the area. So an industry has grown up really rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years surrounding ecotourism, and it's in fact the only place in the world now where people can snorkel in the water with orca. And currently, that is an unregulated practice. So anybody can actually do that. And there's lots of general whale watching operations as well, where you'll just go on a boat. That's a little bit more widely accepted globally. But is, um, there is this opportunity in this one place to actually snorkel with orca, but we don't really understand how the presence of humans in those spaces impacts the orca. And a lot of operations in the area are actually quite keen to see some regulation happen, just so livelihoods are protected and the local ecosystem, which obviously, um, um, like most ocean ecosystems, is subject to degradation through human ness. Anyway, so one of our projects was to go and snorkel with the orca, but while doing it, observe the behavior so that can be tracked and we can better understand how our presence there is impacting them. And on the other side, we were also doing some science, some more science research revolving around environmental DNA, just to get a picture of the ecosystem. So we were collecting water samples and doing visibility tests, and we had hydrophone, and we were doing some observations there to collect a better picture about what creatures were in the water column. So environmental DNA, you're not collecting the you can't tell a specific individual, but by collecting a water sample, all of those skin cells that are sloughed off big marine mammals, from the plankton, from all of the other creatures that kind of float through the water column, by doing this environmental DNA, you can get a picture of kind of species distribution, density, and all of that stuff. So you can't say anything about individuals, but you can get a picture at the species level of what's there. So we were a group of 34 women spread over over 3 sailings in November and December, on a boat, kind of following the orca, taking these readings and combining that with, so we had lots of wildlife photographers on board and artists and educators trying to combine all of this information into a story that could be used to enhance ocean protection and understanding. And personally, I went on there as a geoscientist. That's my background, so I was helping with kind of all of the terrain data and geolocation and all of that stuff. But really, from my personal goal was to build a VR experience to submit for the UN competition Metaverse for the SDGs under the Sustainable Development Goal Life Below Water, number 14. So that's kind of really what drew me, but what I found was a profoundly impacting experience that impacted me in ways that I couldn't really have predicted, and still I'm trying to work out how to articulate.
I mean, I wanted to ask you about that too, but before I do, just you see the picture next to there, you won 3 prizes for this, and you just found out this week, right?
Yeah, we found out last week that we were shortlisted as semi-finalists for the Metaverse for the SDGs competition. So that is a competition, a global competition that invites submissions of virtual worlds, virtual experiences that build awareness, education, and empathy for one of the Sustainable Development Goals. So amazing. Unsurprisingly, with an orca experience, we were focused on life below water, and then so we have to, the next stage for that one is we have to do a guided playthrough of the game kind of in July with the judges. And then after that, we'll see if we have been awarded some prize money, and we should find out about that in September.
I see. Okay. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's exciting. And then we also submitted our kind of game trailer to a film festival called the Art of Movie Making Film Fest. And we found out on Saturday that we had been awarded 2 prizes. One in the best sound design category. One of my team members, Aya Walraven, has done some amazing work doing the sound design. She's taken the recorded sounds of the whales in the ocean and whatnot that we captured during the expedition, and actually synthesized sounds based on those, and composed music for the game to really build that sense of immersion and atmosphere, which is super exciting. And then the other one is the best use of new technology, which is I guess related to our general use of VR rather than flat.
That's amazing. That is just so amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very
really
much.
Amazing. Oh, you're welcome. And I think you were on your way to talk about this. You mentioned to me earlier that you found a close-knit group of women very similar in a way to how the Orca family life was. I would love to hear more about that, or how Orca lived together, rather. And I would love
Yeah.
to hear more about that.
So
You,
kind
you
of
want to
part
share?
of the interest in the expedition of kind of studying Orca as an all female expedition organization is related to the structure of Orca communities. Orca exist in uh, matrilineal family pods, so they are um, they are grandmothers and mothers and daughters all live together and share their experiences and share their culture from generation to generation. And it's really the women of the female orca which are really kind of drive the show. So this female story of the orca was something that really drove, which is really drove the kind of expedition to to go there and study them, but also from a personal perspective, um, being in that place with those creatures and being surrounded by these like 14 incredible women who share was so willing to share and learn from one another. It was really it was just really nice to kind of parallel that those deep female bonds in our own experience on the boat. And I mean, to put it into perspective, we came back 6 months ago, and I think not a day has gone by in those 6 months that we haven't communicated one way or another on our group WhatsApp channel. Um, we are very close. I just came back after the AWE conference. I took I bypassed coming. I took a detour coming home and stopped in Vancouver, Washington, to visit with one of my co-expedition members. And it was a very profound experience being put in that place in being in a new foreign environment to with and we where we bonded over a shared passion for the ocean, a shared interest in curiosity, a desire to learn, a desire to share, a desire to support one another, and um, and the need for creative problem solving. We were in the first of three cohorts, so no one had done this real expedition before. So we had to go and we had to work out the experimental protocols. We had to work out what time we needed to take all of these, how to take all of these readings and samples in suboptimal conditions. We had to problem solve malfunctioning equipment and batteries so we could write the protocols for the following groups, which was really fun. And I'm really glad that I was in the group that had to do that. And what resulted was some really deep and close bonds. And at the end of it, we were talking. It's like, well, what's like the most profound experience of this is, and it was that I filled a hole that I didn't even know was there, which was having that deep and rich company of women in that way that I hadn't experienced for a while. And if you see this, so this picture behind me here is taken from our fourth day for our fourth day snorkeling, and we just had the most incredible day. We had dropped in on a bait ball. We had just been given a show of orca, and just as an aside, being in the water with orca and humpback whales is just something else, and it's why one of the reasons why we want to share that in GR is to help people kind of get that emotional reaction to be in the water with these magnificent creatures and realize and see their intelligence looking in their eyes and seeing how they work together and collaborate and take care of one another and love and care. And these things are just so beautiful to witness, and realizing at the same time that if they chose to, you'd be toast, but they choose not to. They generally just don't care you're there. But it's a very profound experience, and to share that with these people was very special. And we'd finished our diet, we'd finished our drops for the day, and our Zodiac driver just kind of let us hang out in the water, and we spent about 20 minutes, half an hour, just enjoying each other and the time, the space to be quiet and to be reflective in this beautiful place. And we ended up like Aya on the second to the right here, and then myself on the far left. We just kind of started floating, linking arms with our fins out of the water, and it became affectionately referred to as ottering because we looked like a couple of sea otters just kind of gently floating, and that has kind of come with us, and we're now. She's otter number 1, I'm otter number 2, and Tish, our other team member, is otter number 3, and together we are 3 Otters Media. And yeah, so that those moments of closeness but quiet, like we weren't talking, we were just so at ease in each other's company, and that is like one of my favorite days ever, and I love looking at that picture and being reminded of that feeling, those one people. So to have that experience in parallel with witnessing these these this species, these all of these like really strong women orca who are just taking care of business, like it was just really very special and powerful and affirming and inspiring and motivating and all of the superlatives you can think of.
Wow. I mean, it puts things in such perspective, and just I can't even imagine experiencing something like that. It must be absolutely incredible. And you kind of, my sense is like, oh wow, this is what it's all really about. Instead of complaining because you ran out of milk for your coffee or something like that, and then, it sounds incredible. Before I ask something else, does anybody in the audience here have any comments or thoughts or questions? Because thank you so much for sharing this, Dr. Louise. This incredible.
I love how everyone leaps out of their chair when they clap.
Yeah, it's cool. Anyone have any comments or anything you want to ask Dr. Louise? Anything you want to share?
Actually, I do. This is Wendy Sherman, by the way. I think my avatar says Art Slave. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Louise. Hi, Helen.
Hi, Wendy. Hi.
This is so awesome. I just wondering what, this might be kind of off the subject, but wondering what Louise thinks of the orcas that are attacking the boats now. Are they just, they've had enough and they're just done?
You know what? I've done a little bit of reading on this, because I would by no means describe myself as an orca expert, but I have developed a keen interest in them since this experience and running up to it. From what I have read, what I understand, like there's kind of two competing hypotheses. One is that, yes, just as you say, Wendy, they've had some bad experiences with boats and they are just like taking their revenge in a kind of Steve Zissou-esque way. But another one is that they're playing. It gives them joy to note and see other one. They're just playing pranks on the teams. Personally, I think the latter is more likely. I think while there is definitely generational memory in Orca, I think that it would be so specific. That would be just this sudden display of attack with no obvious immediate precursor. I think it's unlikely. I think it's more likely that they're just having a lark.
I would never
have they
that. Oh, sorry.
I'm wondering if they've displayed that behavior before, or if this is like a new.
It seems to be pretty.
There's too many boats hanging around, and so they're just in the way.
Yeah, and one of them probably did it once and decided it was fun. Just like new behaviors kind of take hold in humans. We're the orca are surprisingly similar to orca. Orca are surprisingly similar to humans in many ways. Like so, when they are long-lived and social animals, and so they share and model different behaviors. And I think if one of them does something and finds it fun and keeps doing it, others will copy and they find it fun too. And so it kind of goes through a community, just as it would in a human community that discovers that tossing a ball to one another is fun, right? And then you have football of whatever description of football your community enjoys.
I mean, it makes sense.
Thank you for that.
Oh, this is fun. I want to try that.
Yeah.
That's great. And we're in their space too.
No kidding.
In their sea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. No kidding, for sure.
Is that Sarah with your hand up there?
Yes, thank you. This just sounds remarkable. Mine's not actually about the orcas. It's about, would you talk maybe a moment or two about how you dealt with sound in spatial? And what was that like for you, specifically with working with the sound? Because it sounds like you've just got a rich soundscape.
Yes, I mean, we're building our game in Unity, so we have a little bit more flexibility there. I have to say, I haven't really explored sound in spatial like this, but spatial sound is important. So we're using the Meta spatial audio plugin, which is actually surprisingly good. But it is quite important for us to have good spatial audio in there, because we want to get across that this idea of noise pollution and how impactful it is, and the closeness and the density of human activities and how that impacts orca. Also, how orca communicates is a very audio thing, and they use echolocation. So there's a little activity in the game where you actually have to find the bait ball based on an echolocation click train. So if you couldn't identify which direction the sound was coming, this was it was going to not be a very good little activity. So that, from a technical perspective, that's kind of how we've got that spatial audio in there. Design wise, we're really lucky to have Aya, and I wish she was here to kind of talk more about this. But she's a very talented sound designer. So she has used music and sound synthesizing software to actually replicate orca sounds and boat sounds and ambient ocean sounds that have then been input onto game objects, and then she's kind of playing around with attenuation and drop off and all of that, those settings to really replicate kind of how those different sounds would in fact travel through water. And we're not trying to get like hyper realistic, because I think what we've realized throughout the process, both visually, sonically, and gameplay wise, is that hyper realism isn't necessarily the best way towards an emotional reaction. And what we are trying to get is that emotional reaction that puts people in that position where they want to learn more, where they want to act differently. So finding kind of that sweet spot between realism and a stylized environment that really amps up the feeling has been kind of been a kind of a key part of the design process. I have no idea if that answered your question in any way, Sarah.
Sorry, yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, sound is so important. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any more questions or any comments?
I will ask a question.
Hi, Paige.
Hi, Helen. Hi, Louise. Thank you so much
Hi,
for
Paige.
being here and welcoming us at the Foremothers Café and sharing about orcas. Um, this is an incredible project. I'm so excited to hear about it and the possibilities of creating impact um, around climate and I hear you talking about building empathy um, for the orcas and how they think and feel through sound um, and visual storytelling. I'm curious. Have you considered, and maybe I missed this because I entered it a little late, um, are you working with any ocean organizations or museums uh, to create a larger partnership for some project support and broadening the community and conversation?
We are hoping to. Currently, we are not. We haven't established those relationships. We've been so focused on building it for the deadlines, but I think so. My colleague Tiff, who is on the team, she's an ocean journalist. So she has a few hints with a few organizations that we kind of hope to connect with. But honestly, if anybody has any recommendations of places that we can connect with and organizations who might be interested in partnering with us, we would so love to hear about them.
Wonderful. I would love to further that conversation with you. I run a group on Facebook of museums, coalition of museums for climate justice, and I think that your story would really appeal to some of them. And I also know some like ocean organizations, and it would be really, there's nothing, well, there's many things that are really important today, but one of the largest in existential um, issues that we don't deal with enough is climate, and so I'd love to help see this grow and create as much impact as possible. Thanks for doing this work.
We would love that, and also like it doesn't stop here for us. So this is our first project together. It's my first ocean project. The other projects I have been working on are more terrestrial. Earth sciences and also kind of wildlife, terrestrial human wildlife encounters related to kind of human bearing conflict, because I live in bear country. But that's kind of our whole conceit as a studio and as myself as a developer is really to build to help people build a more profound relationship with the planet that then hopefully leads to more pro planetary, pro social behaviors and builds that empathy. So if we can build those kind of connections with those organizations, it's not just found in the fjords that we're looking to build. This is kind of the model that we're kind of operating in, and we'll be heading to Antarctica in February to tell Antarctica's story in VR, or at least one of its stories, because it has so many. But we're really passionate about sharing these places and translating these experiences for more people to see, because we're very conscious of the damage that. So these places are hugely valuable, like hugely powerful. It's very powerful. Going to these places is incredibly powerful for developing a sense of awe and wonder and empathy. But on the flip side, going to these places is in itself destructive. So
Right.
how do you minimize and mitigate that destruction while also capitalizing on the positive impacts that those experiences can have? And that's kind of where the VR and AR comes in for us, is to really transport people to these places that are both inaccessible, inhospitable, and also it's bad for a whole bunch of humans to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent.
Yeah, what an opportunity
you.
for VR to help with this. That's incredible. Anyway, I also, you were saying before, Louise, that um, the orca behavior and how they communicate with each other and how they have a culture and how they pass that on to each other. And I would love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, orca are fascinating creatures, and I think if they look more like us, I think we'd feel more of a natural affinity to them, but we really should feel very connected to them in many ways. They are one of the few species who have been shown to be able to recognize themselves in the mirror, and there's actually some evidence that like humans, the passing on of culture, like the culture drives evolution, so genetic evolution, which is just very, very fascinating. So they have, so they're separated. So the orca inhabit every ocean on the planet, but they are kind of broken up into distinct cultural groups. So the basic group is a family. So this is a matrilineal group where the grandmother and her daughters and granddaughters, and the odd kind of male here and there, and then they will do everything together, and they'll be very, very close knit, just like a human family, really. And then they will probably socialize with some other matrilineal groups, and you'll get kind of tens to 100 kind of individuals, which will make up a pod, and then multiple pods together are called a clan, and each clan is like, a human clan, so they'll share a dialect and specific ways of communicating. But even within that, families will have specific words for things. So growing up at home, we had a lot of just family specific words. Like we used to call the remote for the TV a hoofa doofa. And this is totally unique to our family. And I'm sure you all had unique words that you had in your family, or and then locally in your village there might be, or your small town or the borough or whatever that you lived in, there would be certain specific things that you would know, the ways that you would communicate that would distinguish you from neighboring areas or neighboring cities. But you all speak kind of the same language, so you can kind of understand other people speaking English, even though sometimes I say funny words because I'm from England, basically understand what I'm saying. But then other countries have totally different languages, and you can't really understand what they're saying. And orca culture is kind of similar. So they have if you got a resident and a Pacific resident whale, resident orca from off the Pacific Northwest there, and put them in the water with a North Atlantic orca, they wouldn't know what anyone was saying. They speak totally different languages. But different groups within the Arctic, within the fjords of the North Atlantic and those areas, there would be differences, but they'd probably work out ways to communicate. And so that kind of structure has evolved from in the same way that human culture has evolved. So you get people discovering new places and new niches and adapting, and then passing down that information to people they know and to next generations. And that's exactly what the orca do. So they model behavior, they They use language through clicks and song, not like whale song, but kind of more like calls that you would hear associate with dolphins, because orca are essentially just giant dolphins, and they would uh, um, teach the young and gradually pass these how to hunt, how to eat, how to survive, how to deal with the pesky humans and the pesky humpback whales, and these would kind of be passed down, and others. And the interesting thing about this and kind of why they think that culture is so rich in orca is again another kind of similarity that they have with humans. And they're orca, like humans, are one of the few species where women live many years beyond the menopause. So orca stop giving birth in their 30s, but female orca can live to 80 or 100 years old. So you have a lot of knowledge that stays with the group and can be passed down, even though there is no genetic reason for us to continue living in terms of the genetic legacy. But what that does is produce, like with humans, a cultural legacy that can be maintained, and it makes it like much more stable, because you can if after 40 years something the environment changes, what the grandmother can say, oh well, 50 years ago this is what we did, and you can kind of benefit from that length of that memory, that long memory. So that combination of these social groups that are built on family that will stay together for an individual's entire life, and that life, which is 80 to 100 years, you can start to see why, just like in humans, you get these practices, these rituals, these ways of communicating, ways of hunting, ways of living, ways of traveling, places to visit, how they get transmitted and maintained and grown upon and built upon to build these kind of unique cultures and subcultures in this species. And they really are quite fascinating. And so culture, very rich in the orca. They pass it down, and they're very smart and they adapt. So you see this in the Arctic fjords with how they've learned to poach fish from the fishing vessels. They kind of hang around and they all convene and wait for the fish to swim out of the net, which is something you get to see in the game, is you have to kind of catch some fish from the net without getting too close that you get caught up. They've adapted to the recent influx of humpback whales to the area over the winter, who can kind of decimate a bait ball and two goats. So they've changed how they respond to how their hunting techniques to respond to that. They really are just the smartest, most fascinating creatures, and I think if we understood just how similar they were to us, and that's kind of part of the idea of the game, is to position you as an orca. You play the role of a young orca, to do that, to make you realize how similar they are to us. And I think if we saw how intelligent and caring and complex their lives were, I think we'd see them less as these like hunting machines that like to ram seals, but which they do, but that's life, right?
And yeah, I love that we get this, because you're very right. We hear of them as killer whales, and I didn't know any of this until you came along and we started talking, and I had no idea. And thank you so much for sharing all of this.
You're welcome. Neither did I. Like beforehand, I would never. Before I went on this expedition and was preparing for this expedition, I had no idea. It's totally revolutionized my kind of understanding of them, and it opens your eyes. And although right now they're one of the few non-human species who we can kind of categorically identify in culture as having culture. I think what it does, hopefully does, is open our eyes to the possibility of all of the other species and creatures that probably also have culture as well. We just don't look for it or want or don't see it. And I think that if there's one thing you can learn is that before we never saw this and now we have. So where else should we be looking to find it?
Everywhere. Even my dogs at home, you can tell that there's culture between them, and they copy each other, and they do things that the other. I have two dogs, and they have their own little pack culture in our little tiny family with us and with the two of them and me, my husband, and yeah, it's very important that our eyes are opened to this, I think. Anyone else have comments or questions about this?
Well, thank you so much. I missed a little bit, so I'm sorry if you already talked about this, Louise. But I was curious, how long do the males stick around? Are they pretty much neat?
Well, interestingly, they did a study recently that discovered that kind of identified that male children were like really harmful for their mothers because they stick around and they never really leave, and they hang around and just expect and are quite the drain on their mother's resources. So they're around and they are involved in hunting and life, but mainly they just eat a lot, I think. And they've identified, they know, as most species do, that they to keep the genetic variation, mating doesn't take place within pods, so they'll kind of go to an area and then make sure that they mate with males that are outside of the pods. But the boys in the pod tend to stay, as far as I know, fairly close to mum for their lives.
Oh.
And you can distinguish, so if you're ever looking, you can distinguish them physically. So if you look at the picture of the orcas here, this is two females. And you can tell this because they have a much shorter fin, dorsal fin, and it's kind of slightly curved. But the males are much bigger, and they have the big kind of razor-looking dorsal fin that is like 6 foot tall. Yeah. So if you're ever wondering, that's the easiest way of distinguishing the male from the female orca, is the shape of the dorsal fin.
Oh. Good to know. Thing that the males, they live with their moms, so they're still part of the clan.
Mm-hmm.
Or are they also traveling alone and forming their own little pods with other males? Or
so that's a really good question. It was something that I was interested in too, whether they formed kind of bachelor pods. And from what I could work out, no, they don't. They tend to be they tend to keep with families. You wouldn't get kind of separate male only pods.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they'd survive very well because they show them how to hunt.
Thank you.
But that might depend on the particular population. My knowledge is really focused on the North Atlantic orca, and there are definitely cultural differences and behavioral differences, quite strong ones, between those populations or ecotypes. So I wouldn't want to speak too strongly about male orca everywhere.
Oh, okay. I thought it's to me, what I think is the most interesting is the culture and how that forms, and it's really opens you up, like you said, to understand how similar we are to our fellow creatures here on our planet, and we're not that
I
different.
agree. No,
It's
And I
It's
think we
wonderful to
overlap
hear.
more than we don't. And it's quite profound to witness that and to think
Mhm.
and to really think like I can't understand you, but I wonder how you perceive the world. Like what is your thought process? Like how do you like our thought processes are so based on our own language that we
Mhm.
speak and is so closely interrelated. But like if you're an orca and you talk in whistles, do you think in whistles?
Exactly.
I don't know, right? Like, and all of these questions where you're kind of in the water with them, clearly displaying these complex behaviors. Like, what is the cognitive process that is leading to this? Like, it's just fascinating. And I mean, I don't know if we can ever if that's ever knowable, but I do enjoy pondering it.
Yeah, so do I, and it's really it's amazing. And like, how do they think? Do they think in clicks, in smells, in and yeah, it's and how is actually I didn't think of that. Is there a way to know if they have a good sense of smell, and is that also part of their life?
Um,
Because in water, it's hard for me even to picture smelling in water, but I'm sure they do, right?
yeah. So certainly sharks use scent to find prey. Like that's they will take in the water, like well, the equivalent of like senses
Oh,
with the water go to their gills and into and through their nose. But um, from what I understand, orca really um, they're they're very dependent on echolocation and so audio sonic sonar essentially. So they locate they map their world and understand their world in sound. They have their eyesight is quite similar to human eyesight. Um, Obviously slightly adjusted for being underwater, but it's that kind of acuity. And trust me, you weren't seeing very far. So they only on very close up things will they rely on sight. And everything else they have just very 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 detailed high acuity sound maps that they use to interpret their surroundings.
okay. But they recognize themselves in a mirror. How did people
Yep.
figure that out?
So it's similar to it's a captivity thing. It's the same. They've done it with dolphins as well. And again, I am not an animal psychologist, behavioral psychologist, so I can't talk to the specific of the experiments. But basically, they'll have a certain set of criteria that they've identified that that shows that you are recognizing something of another species or an individual that is you, and there are certain behaviors that are associated with that they have observed in dolphins and orca, but no other species.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I wish I could speak to it more precisely, but unfortunately, I do not have that expertise. But yeah, that is they put Orca in front of a big mirror and see it.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've tried to incorporate that a little bit in our game, so really to improve the kind of to get that sense of embodiment. We wanted to use this idea lots of times in games when you're inhabiting another person. They'll put you in front of a mirror to kind of get you accustomed to being in that body, and so we wanted to do that with Nora the orca too, because recognizing if you're an orca you would in fact recognize yourself, so we used the surface of the water as a reflection.
Right. That's amazing. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for telling us all of this.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. It was really fun to share the experience with you all. And if you have any questions that come up, don't hesitate to drop me a line.